the biggest picture and the biggest threat and the biggest, I guess, sad reality is that we're not recognizing what's really happening. Nobody's really talking about the racketeering enterprise. Big Pharma is deep state. It's been deep state since World War II. You had the Rockefeller cartel joining partners with IG Farben, Germany's leading industrial organization, that for all practical purposes was the Third Reich. Their top officials were the top SS. And so at the end of World War II, you had a quote, decartelization, end quote, decartelization proceedings. And you had actually federal court judge say that the Rockefellers were married partners to IG Farben that basically didn't get any damage during the bombing of World War II in Germany, and that you had this as the pristine new beginning of the transition between the OSS and the CIA. This was the beginning of the CIA. The decartelization of IG Farben with the Rockefeller partners was the beginning of your CIA. And so throughout these decades, you've had an expansion and you've had successors in interest, successors who succeeded IG Farben and the Rockefeller cartel. Well, the Bayer Corporation was right at the top. You had the Merck Pharmaceutical Company. You had George W. Merck, who was appointed by President Roosevelt to be America's biological weapons industry director, personally appointed. So basically, that Merck Pharmaceutical Company became the world's leading vaccine manufacturer. You had HIV/AIDS, for history's sake, go back to the late 60s, early 70s, and you had the Merck Pharmaceutical Company working with Dr. Robert Gallo and the National Cancer Institute testing new vaccinations for the development of cancer. It was inducing cancer. You have to understand, if they're searching for viruses that induce cancer and that develop then from that research vaccines, you have to start with the virus. And you have to start with how they actually, at that time period, got the virus, various cancer viruses. How did they get HIV/AIDS, for example? And that's the research that I did. I challenged Dr. Gallo, the alleged discoverer of HIV/AIDS. I challenged him at the 11th International Conference on AIDS in Vancouver. But basically, Dr. Gallo is unquestionably at the center of the laboratory developers of what became known as HIV, the AIDS virus itself. So they had the virus and they had vaccinations. At the time, they had been working on hepatitis B. And if you want to know why it is that the absurdity of injecting hepatitis B vaccines into 12-hour-old infants whose immune systems are not even mature yet, and that when you look at an infant, it's not sexually promiscuous, it's not at high risk, it's not an IV drug user, it's not a healthcare professional who gets stuck with bloody needles. An infant, a 12-hour-old infant, getting injected with a vaccine supposedly to reduce a sexually transmitted disease and a bloodborne pathogen, you can't make any sense to that. It's unreasonable. It goes directly to the issue that I began with. You're dealing with a racketeering enterprise that is criminal. It's a criminal, psychopathic, soulless, demonic, racketeering enterprise that has been established since World War II and has been manipulating our brains and our blood ever since. And our brains are being obviously manipulated by the disgusting commercials, which is simply commercializing the normalization of pathology, of disease. You watch commercials in prime time now, almost all of them are drug commercials that are altering the culture. The culture is about drugs and drug side effects, normalizing disease, normalizing taking medicines and vaccinations that induce all of these other diseases that are most profitable and excellent for depopulation. So you have profitable depopulation as the objective of the status quo deep state, and that depopulation is administered simply because smaller populations are easier to control. And so you go back in history, go back to where the immigrants were coming in to New York and then basically causing the explosion of the unionization of immigrants that literally threatened the status quo of the large corporations. And so the status quo of the Fords and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Carnegies and the people who are really controlling the mafia in America, you had basically these individuals recognizing the need for depopulation, for population control. I learned this the hard way too. I didn't just read it in a book. When I went to Africa and I was intimately connected for quite a time with the Bongo family, the first family of Gabon. And I learned that what we're learning in headline news today, it's about US aid that's been intimately connected to administering CIA programs and policies in third world countries. You had the CIA who was involved in administering the vaccinations in Africa, the hepatitis B vaccines for not just 12-hour-old infants in New York, not only at Willowbrook State School mentally retarded children on Staten Island. That was a study site, along with the gay men in New York City in the Village. But also in Africa, at the same time, the same vaccination, hepatitis B vaccine, was being administered to, they claimed, high-risk individuals, the sex workers in Central Africa, Congo, and that area. And basically, that's Central Africa AIDS belt. That's where it began, through the hepatitis B vaccine, administered by CIA. So today you have USAID enabling the CIA, the intelligence. And again, you have to consider what's the modus operandi, what's the purpose of this particular demonically possessed, criminal, psychopathic, racketeering enterprise. The purpose is control, power control. And when you're basically, as Nixon said, you're completely empowered, basically absolute power corrupts absolutely. So now you have completely demonic possession and impositions on we the people in the United States. Now you can understand what's really happening. So everything that we get on television, although it's interesting, it's fluff. It's basically overlooking and neglecting, recklessly in this case, recklessly, damagingly neglecting the greatest truth is that the deep state is big pharma, is the vaccination issue, is the poisoning of the population via drug side effects, is the whole concept that, we need to have drugs in order to stay healthy. Suddenly now it's an ungodly premise. It's suddenly you realize now, although the deep state and the woke and the DEI, all of that ideology comes out of godlessness, recognizing that, God has a Holy Spirit is not in their coordinates. God has a Holy Spirit that does all the healing. It's energy, it's frequency. Your thoughts are frequency mediated. Your thoughts, every single neurological firing in your brain is administered via frequency resonant energy. So we're energetic beings. Now, you can't have godly energetic beings enslaved. That's the big issue. That's where the rubber meets the road insofar as this racketeering enterprise committing the genocides that it's committed, the wars, administering and backing the wars. Isn't it interesting that Trump could come in and within 6-8 weeks stop 2 wars? How the heck did that happen? By grace of God? Yeah, I'd like to think that. But again, anybody can do that because you're dealing with reason. It's reasonable to not go to war. It's reasonable to have peace. It's reasonable to have all these blessings that God gives us, including this Holy Spirit power of love that does all the healing, but that's not the agenda. So we're literally living out, witnessing this end time scenario that's administered by deep state pharmaceutical sorcery cartel. And it's right out of the Bible. It's right out of the book of Revelation. Practice sorcery, casting magic spells via mainstream media, and then poisoning people with the satanic sorcery pharmaceuticals. Ultimately, you have total population control. And what's worse of all, if we don't get our AI in the right hands, into people's hands, and legislate and regulate the industry of AI and robotics, you're going to have no more humans, because that's ultimately what Satan's goal is. It's a battle between good God and Satan, Lucifer, and this energy, positive and negative. It goes back to basic physics, where there's a force, there's an equal and opposite force in physics. Well, that's exactly what's taking place energetically, frequency-wise, resonance, energy, spirituality. It's all intertwined there. And energetically, in terms of physics, you have this administration of justice that's administered by mathematics. Creator's language is math. I call it musical mathematics. I say that there is God is greatly defined, honored as the great master conductor and master composer of the universal orchestra that's constantly singing love songs in the frequency of 528, green, healing light. Magnificent. What an administrator. What an amazing creator that we have. And yet, this whole woke issue and the demonic impositions and possessions in our legislators, Adam Schiff, for example, these people are beyond crazy. I'm sorry. Crazy, you get an excuse to get out of responsibility. These people are satanically possessed, soulless administrators of mass murder, of genocide. And you can't get more evil than that. And so to the extent that we're not actually talking about that Kennedy's making progress, CDC is increasing their concerns about what we've talked about for a quarter century already, the mercury toxicity leading to the vaccination, injury, affecting the nerves, the brain, autistic spectrum disorder, burdening society, burdening families, destroying families to the extent that they have and censored all of that, and giving Big Pharma a free ride, not liable for any of the damage that they cause. What a contrivance. This is despicable. It's unconscionable. It shocks the conscience of a human being. And that's what we accept now, unfortunately, with Mr. Kennedy, with what his position is, because he softened it on this whole vaccination matter. From my perspective, he's a latecomer to the debate. God bless him and welcome him, and I pray that he's fantastically successful. But the reality is that unless we address, that is, diagnose, that means see to the root of the disorder, diagnose, discern what's really happening politically, economically, where you have this genocidal malpractice administered by deep state con artists who we don't even, get to, prosecute in the CIA. Central intelligence tells you everything you need to know. This is about forming the intelligence, the beliefs, the attitudes, the behaviors of society, of we the people. That's what Central Intelligence does. The program is called MK Ultra. Project Stargate, which the president has advanced now with Larry Ellison and Sam Altman and OpenAI, with behind the scenes Microsoft, Bill Gates, the wrong hands to be developing the most advanced AI robotics for disease control, injecting your bloodstream with nanobots, nano chips, your nano bioelectronic technologies in the vaccinations that include the whole concept of adding this hydrogel that contains graphene It produces the poison graphene oxide, poisoning us as we get vaccinated. When the press conference occurred, I was in shock, frankly. And see, again, people have to understand Project Stargate is one of the major projects that was administered by Central Intelligence secretly, covertly, for controlling the population. And again, it starts with mind control.